Okay, so we had yesterday a case where if you if you follow the ruling of the Bezdin and you ended up eating chayla, forbidden fat, but Bezdin said it was permitted and you ate it, so that you are exempt. But then we had a case, let's say it got mixed up. Your forbidden fat and your permitted fats got mixed up. So we said maybe you'll be liable in that case, but you can't really blame Bezdin, because even if they didn't issue the ruling, you'd have still mixed up and eaten it. So we said milsa de pshit le, that which is obvious to Rabbi that you'd be liable in that place, that itself was a question for Rami Bar Chama. Let's see, the Bayram Bar Chama, Horu Bezdin. Bezdin made a ruling shechelev mutter, that forbidden fats are permitted. Then it's chalif lo b'shuman, and now it got mixed up his forbidden fat sandwich for his permitted fat sandwich. The achlu mahu. What's the halacha? So that which Rava said, you're for sure going to be liable here. It's for sure your fault, not Bezdin's fault. So you should be liable to bring liable for an inadvertent transgression, and you should bring a chatas offering. He had a question about it. So Amar Rava, Tashma, I'll bring you a brisa. Sorry, we're third wide line, end of 2a. So halach yachid v'asa shogeg al pihen. Says Rava, halach yachid v'asa shogeg al pihen. Our Mishnah says individual went and he did something which the shogeg according to their words. He did an inadvertent action according to their words. What does it mean, an inadvertent action according to their words? They issued that this prohibited fat was permitted. Now he did something inadvertently according to their words. What does that line mean? Shogeg al pihen normally. Lav, is it not coming to include lava sehoru bezin shechelev mutter, that they issued that the forbidden fat is permitted? V'nischalif lo chelev v'shuman, and then it got switched, forbidden fat for permitted fat. The achlu pater, and then they ate it. Then you were going to be exempt. You could still blame the Bezdin for your violation, and that's the novelty of our Mishnah. That for such an inadvertence, when you can blame the Bezdin, then you're going to be exempt. Says Gemara, Dilma shogeg al piem hu de pater, not so fast. Maybe all that line means is that you were shogeg inadvertently by listening to their words, and only in that case you're exempt. But if your own stuff, forget Bezdin, your own meat got mixed up, and then you ended up eating it, then you are liable. You can't fully 100% blame the Bezdin. Okay. Ikeda Amri. Another version of Rava, Amar Rava Tashma halach yachid v'asa shogeg al pihen. Same thing, brings our Mishnah and says, individual went and did something inadvertently according to the words of the court. Ma'ilav shogeg al pihen hu de pater av anaschalev lo chelev b'shuman v'achlu chayiv. Is it not referring to only a case where you can solely blame the Bezdin for your transgression? However, if it got mixed up in your own kitchen, then you're going to be liable. That we say, no, Dilma o shogeg o al pihen. Maybe it's either one, whether you blame the Bezdin, whether they issued an erroneous ruling, and your meat got mixed up, or they issued an erroneous ruling and your meat didn't get mixed up. Either way, you were really following their words, and therefore that's why you're going to be exempt. So, okay, so now let's see. The plukta, it sounds like this that we're trying to figure out here about your meat being switched was already an earlier machlokus in the Amorai. Horu Bezdin issued a ruling shechelev mutter, the chelev is permitted. Chalif lo chelev v'shuman, and it got switched with permitted fats for forbidden fats. The achlu, and then you ate it. What's the halacha? Rav Amar Pater. Rav says you're exempt because your meat got switched, so you can't fully blame the Bezdin for this transgression. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv, and Rabbi Yochanan says you are going to be liable. Okay, fine. So at the end of the day, it's really a machlokas Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav says you're patur, and Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayiv. And from our Mishnah, the wording of our Mishnah, it's inconclusive if you can bring a proof in the Mishnah or not. Okay. May say says the Bryce is going to be a difficulty. Me'am haaretz be'asosa. So talking about the regular inadvertent action that a Jew does, which requires him to bring a sin offering. It says, Me'am ha'aretz be'asosa, from the people who do it. So prat is coming to exclude a mumar, an apostate, someone who's rejected religion. It's coming to exclude him. Why? Hasn't spoken out yet. Why? No, hasn't spoken out yet. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Yossi Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon says Harehu Omer. You don't need that verse to exclude an apostate. We have another verse. Asher lo sasena bishgaga the asham ohoda. It says there someone who did something inadvertently. Yeah, this is what we're talking about. Sounds like a nasi. And the next verse says, "Oh, hoda elav characha." If someone is, it's known to him his avera, asher chataba, in which he erred, he made a mistake. And it says, different gears. Okay, it says, "Oh, hoda," and then it's known to him. So the Gemara learns out, "Hashav midiyaso maybe korban al shiragaso." Which person brings a sin offering for inadvertent action? Only the person that if you told him you did something, that's wrong, don't do that, he would have abstained. Such a person, if you would have told him this is wrong, he'd say, okay, I'm not doing that. Only such a person that when he wasn't aware of his actions is liable to bring a sin offering. However, lo shav midiyaso, ano maybe grum, someone who would not retract and do it anyways, like an apostate, he couldn't care less. You tell him, this is prohibited, he'll be like, give me two. He couldn't care less. So such a person, even if he's unaware of his actions, he's unaware that this is prohibited, he is not going to bring a sacrifice. Eno maybe korban al shagaso. Now, what does that have to do with us? The im isa, if it's true that somebody whose food got switched is going to be liable, halo shav midyasahu. That's not somebody who would retract his actions because his meat got switched. So that's not somebody who he's just following the word of Bezdin, and you would tell him, that Bezdin made a mistake. Yeah, of course, I'll never. So now he'll say, I'll never eat it. If you would know that ahead of time. Therefore, if he does it inadvertently, so it'll be a shogeg. However, in this case where the meat got switched, so that's not considered somebody who would retract because his meat got switched. He would have eaten it anyways. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this Bryce is a difficulty for Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said the guy whose meat got switched is liable. And here we're saying it's only somebody who would have retracted. But here it's his own meat got switched. He doesn't know to retract. It's not a situation where he could have retracted. He mixed up his own meat. And yet, Rabbi Yochanan says you're liable. So Amar Papa, because Rabbi Yochanan thinks, Kaven Dechim Misyadalahu Lebeidina Hajibahu. Who Nabi Hadar Bay, so Shav Midyaso Karinan Bay. So Rabbi Yochanan says, according to Papa, Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Yochanan said that since if he would have found out that Bezdin really made a mistake, then he really would have abstained from eating such meat. So then, even though his own meat got swapped, but since in this kind of case, if he would have known that Bezdin made a mistake, he would have abstained. That's still called somebody who would have retracted his action.
Liable to burn.
A korban. 1 second. Meaning, if Bezdin would have known about it, they would have retracted. If Bezdin would find out that they made a mistake, they would have retracted. And then if they would have retracted, he would have also have retracted. So that's still considered somebody who has the ability to retract if he would have found out what the truth was. That's still enough to make you liable to bring a sacrifice. However, if he solely followed the Bezdin's word, so that's going to be the novelty of our Mishnah, that if you totally followed Bezdin's word, then you, so to speak, you're pinning it on them and not on yourself, so you won't be liable in an offering. Yeah. Okay. Omer Rava, Rava says that Rav, who exempts somebody, who still exempts somebody, even when their own meat switched, and Bezdin ruled erroneously, Rav says you're exempt from to bring a sacrifice. Moder Rav, she'eno mashlim l'rov tzibur. Rav says that this person so the rule is that if Bezdin makes an erroneous judgment, and most of the Jewish people, interesting case that never happened practically, and most of the Jewish people follow their ruling, then they're found that they made a mistake and they have to bring an offering. This person whose meat got swapped, so Bezdin ruled that the forbidden fats are permitted, and he swapped his own meat, and Rav says you're exempt because you're still blaming the Bezdin for making a mistake. Rav agrees that such a person would not be counted as most of the congregation made a mistake according to the Bezdin's erroneous ruling. Meaning, we needed the majority of the Jewish people to have made a mistake. This guy whose meat got swapped, even though he's exempt from bringing an offering, but he's not going to be counted in terms of how many people made the mistake in order for Bezdin to bring an offering. So why would you say that? My time, Omakra, Bishkaga. Achiyu Kulan Bishkaga Achaz. They all have to be in one inadvertent act. Everyone had to have done the same act inadvertently, based off the court's ruling, and therefore, and only then is the court going to be liable to bring an offering. But if a lot of people, let's say, ate the forbidden fats, because Bezdin said it's permitted, but some of the people their meat also got swapped, so then everyone's not in unity in terms of the exact inadvertent act. It has to be the same inadvertent act. Since this guy, it got swapped, so therefore that's not exactly the same inadvertent act as his neighbor whose meat didn't get swapped. He just ate it because the Bezdin said it was mutter. So that little difference makes a big difference. Okay. Now, although in the nitty-gritty, the Mishnah had 3 cases of exemption and 3 cases of liability. What were the 3 cases? It mentioned whether he did it with the court, the violation, whether they did it and he followed them, or they didn't do it, but he did it based off their words. Those are 3 cases, that all those 3 cases, you're going to be exempt from bringing an offering, because you could say, well, I did it because Bezdin said it was permitted. Then you had 3 cases that are liable. Same 3 cases. The 3 cases were whether one knows about it, or he's one who is fit to issue a ruling. Sorry, after that, it says, one of these people who knows that they made a mistake. What were the 3 cases? Either he did it together with them, or they did it and he followed, same thing, or they ruled and he did it. So we have, you do it together with the Bezdin, that's the first case. You follow Bezdin, they eat the forbidden fat, and then you eat after them, your next line in the restaurant. Or you hear about their ruling, and then you go and do it yourself. So the question is, why do you have to have these 3 cases when you're exempt? And why list 3 cases when you're going to be liable? What's the logic? Why do you have so many cases? So, Lama Leila Misnei Kol Hani. Why are you teaching me all these cases? You basically have 6 cases, 3 of exemption and 3 of liability. together with Bezdin, after Bezdin, without Bezdin. So why do you have to have 6 cases? So says the Gemara, Bishlama Reisha, in terms of how Mishnayos are sometimes written, here are some of the exceptions. Usually we want an exact systematic order, but sometimes, like in this case, Bishlama Reisha, it's in something called a lozu avzu. Not only this, but even this. So not only when you and Bezdin sit down for a parlor meeting and have forbidden fats, and you guys all eat it together, are you exempt? But even when you eat when Bezdin's not there, when you follow them in the restaurant, even then you're liable. Not only there are you liable, but even when they ruled and they did not eat, but you went and based off their ruling, you ate, there you're going to be liable. So it's called a lozu avzu. It teaches the biggest novelty as you progress. Eating with them, you can for sure blame them. Eating after them, so a little bit more of a novelty. Eating without them, and you could still blame them for their ruling, and you'll be exempt from a sacrifice. Ooh, that's a big novelty. The not the problem, but the question on this logic always is, just teach the third case, and I'll know cases 1 and 2. Just teach the case that I heard Bezdin's ruling and I did it, and I'm liable for sure if I follow them in the restaurant, or if I ate with them, for sure I'll be liable. So that's interesting. Yeah, okay, but that's lozu avzu katani. So says the Gemara, but that logic, that pattern of progressing novelty, is not going to fit into the latter part. Ela seifa delichiyuva ibcha mibayale. In the latter part of the Mishnah, which is telling you that you are exempt, that you cannot blame the Bezdin. So if it wanted to teach in progressing novelty, it should have taught it in the reverse order. How did it teach it? If you eat with them, you'll be liable. If you eat after them, you'll be liable. Even if you eat without them, you'll be liable. So it should have really taught it the opposite. Not only if you eat without them are you going to be liable, even if you eat after them in the restaurant, you're still liable because you're someone who knows the halacha. And even if you eat with them, then you're still liable. Even if you're there with the biggest rabbi, you're still going to be liable because you yourself are one who knows the rule. If the Mishnah was teaching it in terms of the progressing and the bigger novelty, it should teach it in reverse order in the latter part of the Mishnah. And yet it doesn't do that. So says the Gemara, you're right. It's a zu, the ein tzarich lomer zu katani. It's basically saying, you're right. I taught this and I didn't need to teach that. There's no novelty in that case. So the second half of the Mishnah is talking about a student who is he's fit to issue rulings. And it says, if he does it with the Bezdin, he'll be liable. And even if he does it, with the Bezdin, he can't blame the Bezdin. If he does it afterwards, he still can't blame them. And if he does it on his own, so he also can't blame them. So it's just saying, if he does it with them, and you still can't blame them, for sure the other two you can't blame. The Gemara says, you're right, it's called a zuv ein tzarich lomer zu. I taught this, and it really was not necessary to teach the latter two cases. Then why did it teach it? Probably to have a parallelism, either because to make it easier to memorize, or they put it to a tune. So sometimes you have a little bit of, it's our last resort, that you have something which is really not a novelty. It's not really necessary, but it's there anyways. Yeah. Okay. So now the Mishnah said, if somebody knew, it's two people. Now who are these two people? V'yada echad mehen sheto. One guy knew that Bezdin made a mistake. He knows Bezdin made a mistake. Or it's a student, a Talmud, or a rabbinic scholar, he himself is fitting to be on the court of judges. He's roy lahora. He himself is fitting to issue a ruling. So what do you need these two people for? It's down to the point is that it's a guy who knows that Bezdin made a mistake. So why do you have two kinds of people? A guy who knows and someone who's fitting to issue a ruling. Tarti lamali. What do you need these two people for? Amarava, you need both people. Why? You would have thought that Hani Mili is a Gamir Vesavir. The only person who's really going to be liable is one who is, not only does he know the ruling, but he's at a level himself where he himself could Savir means to derive one thing from another thing, meaning it's a higher level of learning. Not only do you know the laws, but you could use the rules and apply it on your own and issue your own halakhic rulings. So So you would have thought that only such a high caliber individual cannot blame the court. Only he who knows that the court made a mistake is going to be liable. Aval gamir below savir lo, but someone who is a gamir, he knows the laws, but he's not at that level yet where he could really understand all the rules and therefore issue really his own rulings. So you would have thought that such a person is not going to be liable. To which the Mishnah tells you that a Talmud, a student who is able to issue his own rulings, meaning he can understand the rules and apply them on his own, such a person is not only is a person who's very knowledgeable, but even a person who is a learned person, but cannot issue his own rulings, even he's going to be liable. So that's what we need. We need to teach you that even the lower level student, so to speak, is going to be liable for if he follows the erroneous issue of Bezdin. He cannot blame Bezdin because he knows the rule, and therefore he is going to be liable. Says Abaye, Amar Abaye, lehora gamir v'saver mashma. That second person in the Mishnah called a Talmud, haroi lehora, a student who's fitting to issue rulings. Abaye says you can't. It doesn't sound like that's referring to somebody who's not really fit to issue rulings, but he's like he's in the middle of his rabbinical program. Rabbi said that person, the student that can issue his rulings, Rabbi said is referring to somebody who's a gamir, he's learned, but he can't yet, he's not yet at that level where he could really issue all of his own rulings. Abaye says, well, the words definitely sound like that. Amar le'Abaye lehora, the words issue rulings sound like he's a gamir and a savir. He knows the laws, and he's able to apply the rules in his own way and issue his own rulings. The question is, what does it mean a student who can issue rulings? Is it someone who is issue? Let's say there's two levels, lower level and higher level. Lower level is, let's say nowadays, he knows everything that the Mishnah Berurah said. You ask anything in the Mishnah Berurah, he has on his fingertips, he can issue a ruling. That's lower level. A higher level student is, he takes like a posek. He can take the rules of the Mishnah Berurah and write his own response. So Rabbi said that when it says a student who's fitting to answer questions, it was only someone who just knew the rules, knew all the laws, but he wasn't able to take the logic on his own and issue his own ruling necessarily. Abaye says it sounds like Amar le'Abaye lehora gamir v'saver mashma. Issue your own rulings means all the way. You can issue any of your own rulings, so you're already on a higher level. So if that's true, and once again, what are these two people in the Mishnah? One who knows they made a mistake, and one who's a high caliber Talmud scholar. So what are these two things? They're unnecessary. They're repetitive. So Amar le, so he told him, Rabbi told Abaye, Ana hachikamina. I was saying the following. Imehahi, if we just had one of the cases, Havamina hani mili gamir v'savir. You'd have thought that only a gamir and a savir. Aval gamir v'lo savir, low. But someone who is a gamir v'lo savir, who's learned, but not at that higher level of learning that he understands on his own and can apply his own rulings, you would have thought such a person can still blame the court for their ruling and be exempt from an offering. So Tana Roy Lehora. So that's why our Mishnah said Roy Lehora to teach you that so Tana Roy Lehora. Me Mishnah Yisera, from the extra wording in the Mishnah. Now I know Afilu Gamir below Savir, Savir below Gamir. Sounds like that Rav is saying from the extra cases of the Mishnah, I'm going to learn both. I'll learn that someone who's fully knowledgeable is going to be liable, and I'll also learn that somebody who's less knowledgeable is also going to be liable. It sounds like, I'm not exactly clear from which edition of the Mishnah, which added statements, but Rava's point is that you have two statements of the Mishnah. It's for yourself to figure out that it's referring to two different cases, a lower level and a higher level scholar. And the Mishnah is teaching you in both those cases, it's he cannot blame the court and therefore be exempt from bringing a sin offering. Rather, he can only blame himself. Since he can only blame himself because he knows the halacha, therefore he is going to be obligated in bringing a sin offering. Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day, Rava accepts Abaye's rebuttal that when it says a Talmud Haray Lahara, a student who's fitting to issue rulings, it is referring to a Gamir Visavir. It's referring to a higher level student who knows and can apply his own logic. But from the extra wording of and Yada Echad, the one guy who knows, you'll understand it that it's teaching you even someone who cannot issue really his own rulings, but someone who's knowledgeable in the rulings, even he can only blame himself if he eats the forbidden fat, and therefore he'll be liable. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Roy lahora. Okay. So coming off of this, who is someone who's fitting to issue rulings? Kigon man. Give me an example of someone like this. Amarava, Kigon Shimon ben Azai, the Shimon ben Zoma. It's referring to people like Shimon ben Azai and Shimon ben Zoma. Okay, sounds like those are two very high-level people. Yeah, they were people, Rashi says, that sat in front of the sages and discussed rulings with them. Fine, very high-level people. Now, that's what Rava said. Amar le'abaye. So, Kihai Gavna Mezidu. What's happening over here? The highest level rabbinical, the highest level rabbis, what's happening? They know that forbidden fat is forbidden. The high court ruled it's permitted. They know the court made a mistake and they ate it anyways. There's no inadvertence in that. If you know it's wrong and you ate it, you're called a mason, that you did advertently. And our mission is discussing someone who did it inadvertently and you're still liable for a sin offering. This is advertent. So that's Abaye's rebuttal to Rava. To which Rava responds to them, according to your reasoning, that you're calling that a mazid. So Haditanya, look at this brisa. The asosa, it says if someone does something inadvertently. Yeah, inadvertently. So the asosa achas yachira. So ba'asosa. So we'll take it. Okay. Yachira osa mipi atzmo chayiv. A person who does it on his own, he does his own inadvertent act. He's liable to bring a sin offering. But behora'as bezdin, if the court rules it, then he's exempt. Okay. Ketzad, what's the case where the court ruled? Ketzad hora bezdin. Shechelav mutter. Bezdin ruled that chelav, forbidden fats, are mutter. V'noda le'achad mehan shato, and one of the guys knows that Bezdin made a mistake. Or Talmud Yoshev Lefnein, or it's a student sitting in front of them who often discuss things with them. V'roy lahora, he's fitting to issue his own rulings. Kigon Shimon ben Azai, Yachol Yehei Pater. You would think he'll be exempt from bringing a sin offering because he still followed the court's rulings. Talmud Lomer ba'asosa, achas yachid ha'osal piatzmo chayiv, v'horaz bezdin pater. The guy who, if on his own he would have done it, he would have been liable as an offering. That same act, if Bezdin issued it, if the court issued that ruling, he's going to be exempt. So, what's that case? What? Tell me a case according to you that if the guy would have done it on his own, he knows that it's going to be. He would have brought a sin offering, and now he knows that Bezdin made a mistake, and now he's exempt. According to you, if the guy knows that Bezdin made a mistake, then that's called amazing. That's called advertent act. And yet the Brisa says it's called an inadvertent act. So what's the case according to you? So he says, these people, they know it's prohibited. So where is their mistake? Why is it called inadvertent? The katayi in the following rule. The mitzvah lishmoa divrei chachamim. There's a mitzvah in the Torah we had not so long ago, a few weeks ago, lo sasser, that you're not allowed to deviate from what the rabbis say. That there's a mitzvah to listen to their word. So they made a mistake in the scope of that ruling. They thought that only applies if you don't know. But if you know the rabbis made a mistake, then there is no mitzvah to listen to them. So that's why they went. That was their mistake. So really, there was an inadvertent mistake. The mistake was they misunderstood this ruling in the Torah that you have to listen to the rabbis. So just like you'll interpret the Brisa that way, our case in the Mishnah also, according to him, is going to refer to a case where they made a mistake in terms of the mitzvah l'shmo l'divrei chachamim. They misunderstood that ruling, and they thought that when Beis Din rules that something is let's say that forbidden fats are permitted, they thought that even when Beis Din makes a mistake, there's still a mitzvah to listen to them. That was their error. Their error was they misunderstood that when it says in the Torah, listen to the rabbis, it's not referring to when you know they made a mistake. It's only referring to in other cases. So since they thought that even when they make a mistake, you have to listen to them, therefore they even though they knew this forbidden fat is permitted, but at the end of the day, if Beis Din ruled that it's permitted, then it's permitted. So therefore they went and they ate it. But that's still going to be a case of inadvertence. It's not going to be a case of advertence because in their heads, they thought that the Torah is permitting you to eat the meat since the court ruled it's permitted. So therefore, it's not a case of advertence. It's a case of inadvertence. They made a mistake in that law. Really, if Beis Din makes a mistake, then you don't listen to them. But they thought that you could still listen to them. And therefore, we still consider the act an inadvertent act. So, funny thing, they know it's, the Torah says chaylev is asur. The forbidden fats are forbidden. The court rules that they are permitted. These people, on the one hand, they know the Torah says it's prohibited, but the same Torah says also there's a mitzvah to follow the ruling of the rabbis. So if they issued it's permitted, it must be permitted. So that's why they ended up eating that piece of meat.
Because if you don't, you actually start undermining the book.
Right, and that's a much bigger problem.
That's a bigger problem.
It's like a memory problem. Yeah.
Yeah, because
I mean, it seems very clear from here that in general, a ruling from someone who's fitting to rule, it creates a reality. You bring a question: is the chicken kosher or not? And he tells you kosher. That's the reality. Just created a reality of permissibility. So it could be that when the Beis Din ruled, it's interesting. Hashem gave them the power to do this, and even on forbidden fats, if Beis Din, for whatever reason, they thought they said it's permitted, so it could be that these people thought that that's the new reality, that this piece of meat is really permitted. It's the same Hashem said it's forbidden, so you have to listen to the Beis Din. So Kamash Malan, that no, if you really know, whatever knowing means, you have proofs, and if they really made a mistake, then there is no mitzvah l'shmo l'divrei chachamim. Yeah. To listen to the rabbis. Yeah. Sorry, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Zeh HaKlal, this is the rule. Atola ba'atzmo chayiv. One who blames himself is going to be liable, and he cannot blame the court. So we're talking about a guy who ate the forbidden fats. But if he did it on his own, not because Beis Din ruled, then of course he'll be liable to bring a sin offering. So who's this coming to include? La'asuye mai, la'asuye mabit behora. That this person is usually one who rejects the rulings of rabbis. He always rejects their rulings. And then they ruled that the chaylev is going to be mutter, that the forbidden fat is going to be permitted. And this person went and actually listened to them. And he ate the chaylev, he is going to be liable. Why? Because since the way he acts usually is he rejects the rulings of the court. He usually rejects them. So then here also he should have rejected it. So when he's eating it when he's eating the meat, why is he eating the forbidden fat? So a normal person is eating the forbidden fat because the court ruled that it's permitted. That's why. But this guy never follows what the court says. So in this case, when he eats it, we don't assume he ate it because the court said. We assume he ate it because he ate it whatever the reason is, on his own he ate it, and therefore he's still going to be liable. He can't come and say, "Oh, the court ruled that it's permitted." Your track record has shown that every time they open up their mouth, you reject them. So don't come here and start saying, "Oh no, I'm blaming them, and therefore I should be exempt." Rather, you're going to be liable. What time is it? Up here. 47?
Yeah, it's 48.
40, okay, so it's Thursday, right?